All right, so episode number 2, 15 minutes talking about your childhood in Belfast. Under the age of 10, I think might be good, or up until maybe you went to secondary school or something like that.
So from 10,
yeah, from the day,
up until 10.
yeah, from the day you were born.
Jesus, I don't remember the day I was born.
Where were you born?
I was born in Belfast, and I don't know exactly where.
Which
but
hospital though? The birth cert's in that box.
My birth cert's not in that box. That's my father's birth cert. I don't know where I was born. I can't remember. 6th of January 1952. And I was the first school I went to was down in the centre of Belfast. It was a Christian Brothers school. It was I could only attribute it to a mild force version of Auschwitz. It was dreadful. The only difference was they didn't kill you, but they tried very hard to.
How many students were in the class? Like,
There would have been 30, 40 lads in a class.
all boys.
All boys. And the school was called Barrack Street. And the reason they called it Barrack Street was that the school was an old barracks converted into a school. And there was big iron stairs, goes up to the second level, lethal in the winter. There was more injuries caused by going up the stairs and down the stairs than there was from what the Christian Brothers lashed out.
And who were these Christian Brothers?
These were men that were
From
educated.
Belfast.
No, none of them were ever from Belfast. They were all from the Republic of Ireland, mostly. And sure, we could never understand what they were saying half the time, because they all had a thing called a brogue.
Yeah.
And they'd be talking to you, and they weren't interested in educating you. You only went to school because it was warmer to go to school than it was to stay at home. And
so they were all up from what is it you say about the first brother being a priest or a doctor? What is that?
The first brother, what?
The first brother of a family would be a doctor.
Well, they were usually, and
then the second brother was sent off.
They were sent. It was a free education for them. They were sent off to be educated, and they became teachers. And then the mother would have loved to have said, "The son's a brother. He's a Christian brother." There was no Christianity in them.
What subjects did you study in primary school?
You got English, maths, geography. I don't remember.
No Irish.
Yeah, Irish. But your kids couldn't speak English. Never mind about speaking Irish. Fellas in Belfast abbreviated everything. Your mother was your ma. Your father was your da. Na was no. Ah was yes. And bout you covered everything.
And how far away from Knocknagein Road was Knocknagein Road?
Knocknagein Road? Where's that?
What was your road? Your street?
Glen Road.
Glen Road. You grew up in Glen Road.
Glen Road, Norfolk Drive.
Norfolk Drive. How far away was Norfolk Drive from your primary school?
Well, I'll put it to you this way: you got threepence, 3 pence. That was a 1.5 ticket down and 1.5 ticket back up. 1.5 pennies.
Yeah.
No.
North along the Falls Road.
No, right down the Falls Road, past the Royal Victoria Hospital, Dunville, right down into Barrack Street. And if it was a good morning and you were lucky enough and you knew someone, you could get down the road, you hitch a lift down the road or get a car, and you kept the one in the halfpenny. And then if you weren't too tired, you walked back home and you spent the threepence, because my mother used to make us banana sandwiches for our lunch. And she made those about 8 o'clock in the morning. And by the time we got those at 1 o'clock in the day, they were black. So you just threw the banana into the bin and you bought a thing called a Paris bun, which was a big, big piece of bun, dry, with a bit of fruit in it. But you got that for 2pence. And then the rest you spent on a bit of bubble gum or something.
Alright. And what time would you get back to the house, and what would be happening when you got back to your house?
Well, you got back to the house I suppose school ended about 4 o'clock, and you got back to the house.
Primary school, yeah.
Yeah, and you got back to the house. Well, you had your meal, evening meal.
Straight off, yeah. So
Yeah.
you get home, and would there be the smell of country dinner wafting through
There
the
wouldn't
air?
be arse with the smell of boiled mince.
And would your brothers be all there eating it, or?
Well, the brothers, two of my brothers were very rarely there. They were in boarding school.
Right.
And I went to St. Pat's in Armagh. The Retta would have been there and Paddy would have been there. But the Retta went to a different school. I don't know I can't remember. I think Paddy went to the same school as me. I can't remember. And my father never got home till about 8 o'clock at night.
What did he work as?
He was an accountant with an aircraft company.
So was he really intelligent to be an accountant, or was that just something people did back then? Like,
No,
did
he started out to be a solicitor, but he was an alcoholic and he didn't go on.
His whole life alcoholic?
No. He's before he married my mother, and then he gave it up and he went to work for an accountancy attached to an aircraft factory.
So he was a pioneer then, was he?
No. Oh, he was a pioneer. Yeah, he didn't drink. He never drank.
In his whole life?
Well, he did eventually. When he came to live in Skerries, he was drinking. When he wasn't drinking, he went down for a few pints down to Christy Jenkinson's, and Saturdays, summers were holiday in Skerries, or the early part of the summer living in the Falls Park, running up and down the Falls Park, and over to the cooler, the swimming pool that wasn't heated.
Alright, and your best friend was John O'Reilly.
John O'Reilly.
Tell us what you guys got up to.
John O'Reilly and I.
He was from Belfast as well.
He was across the street.
Because O'Reilly's an Irish name, right? It's not.
I don't know. Yeah, but he had 8 sisters, and he was the youngest. And we used to put on little plays in his garage and wear all his sisters' dresses and jewellery, and they used to go mad. And when he died, John O'Reilly died about 3 years ago, and his 8 sisters were at the funeral.
Wow.
And he was the youngest.
What did he get up to? What did you guys get up to?
He worked in the bank.
What did you guys get up to when you were younger?
But sure, there wasn't much to do in Belfast in those days. You just played in the street and did games like Rallyo and hide and seek and things like that. And
did you ever play hurling in school?
Oh, you played hurling, yeah. Hurling.
Tell us about tackle class.
Oh, there was the Christian Brothers used to teach us hurling, and there was this wee scuttery I suppose that's a terrible thing to say, scuttery wee brother called Jones, and he would be standing in the pitch in a freezing cold day in Belfast. Belfast was always freezing cold, and he'd be saying
even in summer.
Even in the summer it was a cold old dull old miserable place, and he'd be standing in the pitch and he'd say, "Now I want you to tackle close now. Tackle close when you're tackle." But what he was trying to say was tackle close, and we called him tickle close. But a great character I grew up, another fellow, Aidan McCourt. He hated Aidan McCourt. He was always hitting him, and McCourt was a great hurley player. And he pucked the ball one day, and he says, "Monty, watch this." And he hit the ball, and he hit Jones clear strike on the head, and Jones went down like a sack of spuds, and we all ran home. And the next day we were all lined up in the hall. Who hit the brother with the ball? I didn't, sir. Don't know. It was a fella coming up the road he had a hurley in his hand, and he hit the ball over the wall. So that was the story.
And you were also big into, well, not big into, but you were also an altar boy, right?
Oh yeah, an altar boy.
And would that have been for a different breed of priest than the brothers?
No, most young fellas were altar boys.
But no, what I mean, were the Christian brothers, were they different from the priests in the churches?
Yeah, well, the Christian brothers didn't say mass or anything.
Oh, they didn't. No,
they were education people.
Oh, okay.
A lot of those lads were. There was
nothing.
A
shite name for a crap teacher, really, isn't it? Like a Christian.
There was no Christianity in them, but some of them, I suppose, were good.
Would they see themselves as men of the cloth, the way the priests?
Oh yeah, and when you met them in the street, you had to nod your hat at. But no, the priests were the hierarchy. They were the ultimate. You didn't.
And they were from Belfast, the priests.
Well, they would have been from everywhere, all over the country. A lot of fellas from Donegal became priests. But I, in later years, went to work on Maynooth College. That's where they educated them. It was a seminary.
Yeah.
And that's where they educated the priests. But I went there to work. I didn't go there to be a priest. Yeah. So I got to know an awful lot of priests. Yeah. And some of them were good. Some of them were good lads. Some of them were.
And when you walked to school in Belfast, would you have encountered a lot of troubles and things like that?
No. And I went to school in 1960, between 52 and 8.
It was still all good.
58, 59. No, there was no troubles then, but there was terrible sectarianism. But you must remember, I went from
were the curbs painted red?
No, we didn't go near those places.
Okay. So
You went out of your house, down Norfolk Drive, turned left, straight down the road to school, and back up again. You never deviated. So we didn't go into Protestant areas.
Yeah,
We would have no reason to.
yeah, exactly.
So, but now, for instance, my father went to a school called St. Malachy's, and he had to cross over the Shankill Road to get to the school.
Yeah.
So every fella that crossed over always had a hurley in his hand.
Right.
So if they met the Protestant lads, they give them a belt with a hurley.
Jesus, that's mad.
So it was crazy. But Belfast Belfast suffered was in the 1960s was still suffering from World War II because the world hadn't recovered from the World War, so there was a lot of poverty, a lot of lacking of food. There wasn't very good food. Like basically, you lived on bread, cheese, milk. They were the things that were cheap.
Yeah.
And there was plenty of them. Things like there was no such things as Chinese restaurants and takeaway food, and there would be a chip shop, but the chips would be full of oil grease.
Can you think of any of the songs you used to sing when you were kids?
Um,
About bread, for example.
Oh, Barney Hughes's bread sticks to your belly like lead. Not a bit of wonder you fart like thunder. Barney Hughes's bread.
Oh, who was Barney Hughes?
Barney Hughes was a Catholic bakery. There was 2 Catholic bakeries, J.B. Kennedy and Barney Hughes.
Yeah.
And they sold all the bread to all the Catholics. And if you went down to Kennedy's bakery at 4:00 in the afternoon, there would be a line of people, and they'd be getting the bread that wasn't sold. But the nuns always got the first choice
And why should you always support a small bakery?
because they need the dough more.
Yeah. And what's the there's something about spaghetti. There's a thing like something fine spaghetti.
Well, you see,
a skipping song.
yeah, there was nobody ate spaghetti in Belfast because we didn't know what pasta was. You never got pasta. So Mrs. Fionda across the road, she was an Italian lady, and her husband owned an ice cream shop down in the centre of Belfast, and she was called Mama Fionda and he was Papa Fionda, and they had a daughter called Angelina Fionda, and she would make spaghetti and she would invite all the lads in who were playing with Angelina, but nobody would go in because we always thought there was a terrible smell in the house, but it was garlic.
Oh, you never smelled garlic before?
We never smelled. No, we never cooked, but she would make this big bowl of spaghetti. It was fabulous. If you had it today, you'd eat it, and I would eat it. And every so often she would come over to the house and knock the door. My mother would go out and she'd say, "There's a bowl of spaghetti for the little Eleni. The Lenny, he'll have a spaghetti." But you could get spaghetti in a can, in a tin. It was called Smedley's. And the ad for the Smedley's spaghetti was, "There's onions, mushrooms, peas and cheese, tomato, bacon, all of these. There's Milanese and Milanese and Smedley's fine spaghetti." And you'd be skipping in the street going, "There's onions, mushrooms, peas and cheese, tomato, bacon, and Smedley's fine spaghetti." But I mean, in fairness, your mother would have made bread and scones and buns and things like that. But when we were walking down the town, and past the Falls Road baths, there was things called baths, bath houses, and people would go in there and have a bath on a Saturday night.
Oh yeah.
Because
like
there's
a steam room kind of thing.
No, there's no baths in their houses.
Oh wow. Geez.
There's no bathrooms.
Who did you share a room with
Where?
in your house?
Oh, I think Paddy, myself, and Jared. Yeah, slept in one room. But then my father later years converted the attic. But a builder, my father was not. He just put a floor and a window. In the middle of winter, it was freezing. In the middle of summer, it was
roasting. What if you misbehaved in a house? What would happen? Would you be in the cold corner? Or
no, you were sent to bed, and that was it. You didn't get your tea.
You didn't get your tea?
No tea. You were sent to bed.
All right.
But sure, it was warmer to go to bed. And there was only one fireplace in the house.
Oh, wow.
Well, there was 2 rooms downstairs. There was the good room, where nobody was allowed into. That was the good furniture, my mother and father's wedding presents all displayed. Pointless, because no one ever used it. And it was beautifully carpeted, all the curtains, and only if somebody very special, or Christmas Day, we were allowed in there.
Yeah, right.
And they would light the fire. But there was only one fireplace downstairs. And you sat around that, and there was a thing called the back boiler.
Yeah.
And you pushed the back boiler to heat the water.
Yeah.
And then later years, there was a thing called an immersion heater.
Yeah.
And my father used to spend the half his life shouting, "Turn off that immersion heater! It's costing electric."
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you had a little electric fire, a 3-bar electric fire,
Oh, yeah.
and he would only allow you to use 1 bar. But sure, there was no heat came off it.
And what would you do? You sit around at night time, listen to the radio, or watch the TV, or BBC?
Well, TV didn't come in. There was no TV when I was born. There was TV. No, you went to bed at 7:30. Everybody was in bed at 7:30.
Really?
Yeah, in the winter. Nobody was. Nobody. If you looked out the window at 8 o'clock at night, there was nobody. Maybe somebody coming from work.
Or a pub?
No, it's just nobody went to pubs in those days.
No.
No, working men, the fellas coming off buses, shifts and stuff, might go into the pub for a pint. There was a pub at the bottom of our street called McEnany's. McEnany's, and it was a bar and a snug.
Yeah.
You know what the snug was?
Snug, yeah.
The snug was
snug?
where the women went into.
Yeah.
Because
They
they
were
were
hidden compartment in a pub. Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't. But no, entertainment, I suppose, was radio, and that was a bit. You went to bed at 7:30.
7:30.
7:30 at night.
And no one would be up or anything.
No, my father might have been coming in from work at 8 o'clock.
What would he do when he came home?
He'd read the paper, listen to the radio, but then later on we got a TV. But TV went off at 9 o'clock.
Oh yeah.
There was nothing on. There was no Sky. There was no remote control. It was a small black and white.
You know, that's 15 minutes now, but I hope things get better. Otherwise,
Oh yeah, things do. Things did get better. Things got much better.
What do you call it? So what's your fondest memory of those first 10 years? Have you got? I know there was snow in Belfast one time. Maybe that's it. But
yeah, there was snow in Belfast, and there was a picture of my sister, the Reto, myself, Paddy, and a fella called McCulloch and McCartney in 1962, Sunday 1962.
You were 10.
I was 10, and the
Belfast under snow.
Belfast under snow, and I suppose you could go back now and look at that, and see that.
Yeah.
I say you could look that up
On the internet. You know?
on the internet.
The article.
Yeah.
But you've had it sticking on the wall since for the last 20 years. Yeah.
But there was no. When you think about it, there was no remote control televisions. There was no colour televisions. There was no, when you wanted to change the station, but there was only 2 stations. And then RTE came in. But sure, there was the Angelus, and there was
there was no RTE in Northern Ireland before that, right?
No, but then when RTE did come in, it was all religion, and there was the Sky at night and things like that.
So your favourite memory is the snow, is it? Or is there
No, I'd say favourite memory. There was good times when you went down to Skerries for the day
even under the age of 10, yeah.
Yeah, we went down to Skerries
For
maybe.
the day, that was a hike.
My father had a car with 3 forward gears.
One forward gear, 3 gears.
3 gears, first, second, and third. Right. And there was no indicator. If you pressed, you did a thing like that. A little arrow popped out.
I've seen that in James Bond movies.
Yeah, and he would leave at 7:30 in the morning, and we'd drive, and he would get mass on the way at Newry, and then we get into Skerries.
Stop for mass.
Oh yeah.
That's miserable. Geez.
Stopped for mass, and then got into Skerries about 10:30. Spent the whole day in Skerries, but sometimes we would go down to an All Ireland final.
Really?
Yeah,
Only if Armagh or Antrim were playing.
No, it didn't matter who were playing, because my father's sister was the Mother Superior of the Sacred Heart Home in Drumcondra.
That's right beside Croke Park.
Right beside, and she got us tickets.
The National Stadium.
And then when we parked the car in the convent, and after the match, he would say to us, "Now we're straight into the car and home," and we'd go in and we'd say goodbye to Sister Claire, and Sister Claire would say, "No, you're not going home without something to eat," and we'd go in, and she'd have this table all set with cooked ham and chicken and salad and brown bread and white bread, and my father said, "No, Claire, we haven't time," and we said, "Dad, and we went in, and what we didn't eat we brought home.
Oh, wow.
And I can remember getting into the car in Dublin and waking up the next morning at 8 o'clock in bed.
In bed. Someone had brought you into bed.
You carried you into bed.
Oh wow, that's a lovely memory.
Yeah.
And if you could go back, last question. If you could go, if I gave you a time machine and you went back to some time in the 60s in Belfast, what's one thing that you'd be like, oh, I can do that you can't do anymore? What's one thing that you miss from
In the
back then?
60s?
Maybe just the people or what, but like what's one thing that you miss from the 60s in Belfast? Good time.
I suppose there was an old uncle of my mother's. What does he call him? Frank. He was known as Red Frank. He wasn't married, and we'd be sitting in the.
As in the Red Hand of Ulster, Frank?
No, just Red. There was just a. You see, there was several Frank Donnellys.
Oh, yeah.
So he was known as Red Frank.
Yeah.
And he would arrive, say, an odd Sunday in the summer, and he'd take us all to Bangor for the day.
Oh, cool.
And my mother and father used to go mad because we didn't get back to about 10 o'clock at night. And he would bring us to
Bangor's about 25 kilometres southwest of Belfast.
Yeah,
right?
down the Sydenham bypass.
Yeah.
And he would bring us to Bangor. And in the centre of Bangor there was a swimming pool called Picky Pool.
Yeah.
And we would go for a swim in Picky Pool. And then he'd get his ice cream.
Yeah.
And then later on we'd spend the whole day going around Bangor. And later on he'd bring us in and we'd get fish and chips and Coke. And then he'd bring us back home.
He's a good guy.
Oh, Red Frank we loved when Red Frank, but you never knew when he was coming.
So if you could get in a time machine, you'd go meet up with Red Frank.
I'd love to go and meet up with Red Frank again. He was a lovely man. I don't know where he was ever buried. I don't know ever heard about him ever again. I don't know anything about him. Anne McAvinny might know.
Yeah.
She would know.
On that positive note,
And Anne McAvinny's father was a doctor. He was Dr. McAvinny.
Oh, yeah.
And every Sunday in life, Jerry and the girls came over to our house in Belfast, over in the Glen Road, Norfolk Drive. Jerry would drive over, he'd have a drink with my father, and he'd sit and chat, and he'd give us money to go down and get an ice cream down in Corrs. And he did that every Sunday in life. And his name was Jerry McAvinny. He was known as the doctor. He had a maid, a housekeeper called Winnie from Tipperary. And Winnie used to say, the doctor. You should, and Anne would tell you, he got up every morning, he dressed meticulously in a suit and shirt and tie and everything. He went down and did his surgery.
Yeah.
He came home, he would have a full lunch. He would get into bed, put on his pyjamas, and sleep for the afternoon. He'd get up at 6 o'clock. He'd get dressed, and he would have he would go over and do his full surgery again. Come home, he'd have a full dinner of roast beef, potatoes. He could eat up to 10 potatoes a day, vegetables, the whole lot. And then he would go down the road, down into the centre of Belfast. No, into a thing called the Bankers Club. It was a private club. And he'd play cards there to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and drink whiskey. And he was coming home one night, and he was stopped by the police. Yeah. And the police wound down the window, and the policeman said, "I've reason to believe you've consumed alcohol." And he says, "Of course I've consumed alcohol. Sure, haven't I been in the Bankers Club since 10 o'clock drinking Dimple Hague?" And the policeman says, "Well, I'm going to have to arrest you and get a blood sample because we've reason to believe that you're driving." Now, in those days, there was no breathalyzers or anything. Yeah. And he said, "Really?" He said, "How would you do that?" He says, "Well, we'd call the police surgeon and we'd take you into custody." Well, he said, "It'd be pointless doing that." And the policeman said, "Why?" He says, "Because the police surgeon's my brother, Kevin Donnelly." And the man said, "That's right." He says, "So it's pointless. Is it conflict of interest?" So the policeman said, Go on. Anne will tell you that. Anne's father. He was a doctor.
And Anne lives in Skerries now, for those of you who
Anne lives in Skerries with her sister.
Right, well, that was nice.
That was nice.
That was a little bit more than 15 minutes.
But there was no charge for that.
And next time we're going to jump into the following decade.
Yeah.
Which is the troublesome teams.
That was the good. The good times are ahead.
And then the troubles start. Right, cool. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right.
Gayborn.